The laughter echoed through the crystal-laced chamber, like a ripple over still water. The Caliph Council, seated in a wide crescent of hovering platforms, each suspended by gravitic nodes, watched the transmission in silence, until the image of the human vessel flickered onto the central hollow emitter. Then came the smirks, then came the disdain. On the feed, a lopsided gray ship rotated slowly over Europa. Weld seams glinted under Jupiter's scattered light. A double cockpit, clearly manual, protruded awkwardly from the front fuselage. Auxiliary thrusters fired unevenly, no visible AI framework, no spectral shielding. High Executor Thenvara tilted his head, his translucent crest flexing in amusement. "Manual control in this era?" he muttered, just loud enough for his immediate circle to hear. The others responded with subtle signs of contempt, flicks of forked tongues, a twitch of the nictitating membrane across glowing opalescent eyes, low nasal puffs, the Caliph equivalent of a snort. Admiral Sir Vorik did not laugh. Standing at the rear of the chamber, his six-digit hand rested on the hilt of his command blade, still ceremonial, despite centuries of irrelevance. His posture was rigid, his skin hue iridescent blue-gold, a rare and prestigious trait. Vorik's gaze remained locked on the feed as the Minerva 1 slowly disappeared into the shadow of Europa. "Their desperation is quaint," he said at last. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The disdain dripped with imperial certainty. On the upper tier, Counselor Dareth Mayan leaned forward, his voice dry. "The humans have no neural lattice warfare, no adaptive AI networks. Their vessels run on fractured logic systems. Even our outpost drones could intercept this relic." "Then let them test it," Vorik answered. "Their failures amuse our analysts. Passive monitoring suffices. Elevating them to threat status would dishonor our own legacy." Murmurs of agreement flickered through the council like synchronized code. The vote was silent, symbolic. The decision had already been made in posture and tone. Passive observation, no action. The chamber lights dimmed as the transmission ended, and the council dissolved into private conversations and filtered exits, iridescent figures disappearing into the glimmering arches of the imperial vault of observation. Across the system, hidden behind static warp fog and solar interference, the Caliph containment fleet hung like a silver crown above the belt of Charon. 19 warships in perfect formation, aligned through synchronetic resonance. Unblinking, impeccable, watching. On Earth, no one was watching. In a narrow, pressurized hangar clamped to the orbital ring above Europa, the Minerva 1 locked into launch protocol with a low hiss of manual seals engaging. There were no flags, no mission patch ceremonies. Just two crew members stepping into a ship that looked by any metric of galactic engineering like salvage. Commander Gavin Narani climbed the ladder first, checking the environmental readout with a flick of his wristband. His boots struck the rungs with a practiced rhythm. No fanfare, no delays. Behind him, Lieutenant Iris Yamura closed her suit collar with a smooth twist, face unreadable, eyes already tracking through internal formulas only she could see. Technicians didn't speak to them. They had already stepped back behind the yellow hazard lines. This wasn't a military launch, it was a gamble. If it failed, nothing would be recorded. If it worked, someone else would write the history. In a cramped observation room beneath the hangar, General Colin Tren of the Orbital Tactical Division stood with his arms crossed. Beside him, Dr. Henrik Solvane, one of the few civilians read into the project, adjusted his glasses without looking away from the screen. "If it works," Solvane said under his breath, "it changes everything." Tren didn't answer. His eyes followed the Minerva as it detached from the clamps and drifted forward under auxiliary impulse. Its signal transponder didn't even use modern encryption, by design. Every step of its launch screamed primitive, harmless, ignorable. But inside that husk was a generator built on unstable gravitational harmonics. And at its core, a human brain with instincts that couldn't be modeled. No AI had ever survived the simulation tests. Back in the command chair of the Minerva, Noorani's voice crackled through the internal comms. "Iris, status?" She didn't look up. Her fingers moved over the secondary interface, not to input, but to feel. She adjusted magnetic coefficients by millidegree increments. Pre-stabilization complete. Oscillation remains within tolerance, for now. Noorani nodded to himself. "How long until detection?" "We've got 14 minutes before their net flags us. 11 if they're not as stupid as they look." A pause. "They're not," Noorani said flatly. "Let's make it count." Far above them, in the outer edges of the current system, the Kalith warships remained in perfect stillness, their passive sensors wide open. Aboard the flagship Threxan Vul, Admiral Varik stood at the forward viewport, arms folded behind his back. He wore the mantle of an imperial strategos, stitched with the sigils of 8 successful campaigns across 3 spiral arms. He had seen a dozen species rise and burn. Humanity did not impress him. "Let the humans test their toy," he said, turning away. "We'll watch, and then we'll forget." The crew bowed slightly as he passed. No orders were given. None needed. To crush a rodent, one waits for it to cross the path. Back on Europa's orbital track, the Minerva 1 burned quietly into the black, its asymmetrical frame wobbling slightly as it cut a jagged path toward the belt of Charon. No digital flags, no escort, no attention. Just 2 humans, alone, riding into the maw of an empire that had already carved their epitaph. And one of them, deep in the silence of her console, was beginning to hear the first strains of the frequencies that didn't exist on paper. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. But the rhythm forming in her mind was not chaos, it was potential. The hull of the Minerva 1 trembled with micro-vibrations as it cut through the outer layer of the Charon system's sensor fog. Nothing violent, just a reminder. Space wasn't quiet. It was alive with pressure shifts, with graviton friction, with currents of invisible force pressing against the weak spots in every weld. Commander Gavin Noorani leaned forward in his seat, hands gripping the manual stabilizers. His eyes tracked the fluctuation gauges, noting the dip in hull integrity at Sector 3, noting it, dismissing it. The ship was holding, barely. "Approach vector engaged," he said, compensating drift manually. Behind him, Iris Yamura sat hunched over the primary gravity harmonics display. Her right foot tapped against the base of the console, not nervously, but in sync with the pulse readings on the waveform scanner. Left to right, 2 taps, pause. Right to left, 1. Again. "Readings?" Noorani asked. She didn't answer at first. Her lips moved slightly, as if repeating numbers only she could hear. 7.3 oscillation, she said finally. Base frequency decaying slower than projected. That's good. Good how? She shook her head, still not looking at him. Good in a way that doesn't last. Outside, the stars remained motionless, but the Minerva's internal readouts blinked furiously. The gravitational harmonics being absorbed by the ship were bleeding into every system. No AI could filter them fast enough. No code could adapt midstream without collapsing in on itself. Iris didn't filter. She interpreted. The lights in the cabin dimmed as a burst of interference passed through the hull. Noorani adjusted the internal gyro dampeners, eyes flicking to the side screen where their trajectory, already jagged, tilted further from expected vectors, exactly as planned. A flicker of light on the interior glass caught Noorani's eye, reflected static. He turned to glance at Iris. Her brow glistened. Her lips were pressed tight. But her hand never hesitated as it twisted the manual tuner by a single degree. Her breathing was controlled, shallow, not from fear, from bandwidth. The screen in front of her displayed no visual map, only a cascade of numbers and spiraling glyphs, symbols not generated, but hand-transcribed from gravitational behavior charts manually developed on Europa. 3 minutes until primary sensor net, Noorani said. Iris responded with a click of her tongue and adjusted the harmonics again. There was no confirmation, just movement. The rhythm was constant. A low hum filled the cabin. Not mechanical, resonant, then dark. Months earlier, somewhere beneath the polar crust of Enceladus. A room with no signage, no windows. The table was made of alloy, unpainted. 4 men in standard gray, 1 woman in civilian blue. "I'm not signing off on this," said Director Rains flatly. "This isn't a prototype. It's a trap with a chair bolted to it." Across the table, Colonel Joran Slate tapped his thumb twice on the file in front of him. He hadn't opened it. "She completes the calculation sets in under 22 seconds. That's with interference." "She's one person," Rains snapped. "You're betting the stability of an experimental weapon on an individual operator's ability to interpret gravitational anomalies faster than a predictive AI." "We've tried with the AIs," said General Colin Tren. 16 different war logic matrices, all failed within threshold range. Couldn't process the anomalies once the harmonics destabilized. He turned to the woman beside him. She remained seated, arms crossed, eyes quiet. Her black hair was tied tight behind her head, not in regulation but close enough. Her name tag read simply, Yamura. "They couldn't adapt," Tren continued. "She can." Rains scoffed. "You're telling me she feels gravity waves?" Tren didn't blink. "She hears them." Rains stood. "No authorization. Not under my clearance." He turned to walk out, but the door didn't open. From the corner, someone had cut the override. Slate slid a small chip across the table to Tren. Tren inserted it into the tabletop reader. A second later, the approval code lit green. "Majority override. Strategic risk class authorized." Rains stared. "You can't be serious." "We don't need consensus," Slate said. "We need options." Back in the Minerva 1, Iris blinked, the phantom echo of memory scattering like dust behind her eyes. Noorani's voice snapped through the comm. "Status?" "Fine," she said, then corrected herself. "Baseline distortion detected. Secondary wave cresting earlier than projected. I'm adjusting." Noorani reached up and flipped a series of switches above his head. Auxiliary systems retracted into standby mode. The ship narrowed its signal profile. Less visible, more fragile, deliberate. 2 minutes to net, he said. "I need silence," Iris replied. He gave it to her. Her fingers moved again, this time more urgently. The left hand controlled amplitude isolation. The right modulated frequency dampeners across 7 overlapping bands. Each adjustment made the Minerva more unstable, but every shift also sharpened the pattern she was listening for. To anyone else, it was background chaos. To her, it was rhythm. 1 note higher, 1 note lower, a hum, a twist, a rising dissonance, and then resolution. "I have a clean harmonic path," she whispered. "I can slip us between pulses." "Confirmed," Noorani said without checking. He didn't ask how she knew. He didn't need to. The trust between them wasn't spoken. It had been earned across years of joint operations in high-risk orbital runs, during failed AI transitions, during blackout simulations where they were the last ones breathing. He had seen her do things machines couldn't explain. He had seen her predict outcomes that no model anticipated. He didn't call her brilliant. He called her necessary. The warning tone sounded, 30 seconds to net breach. Iris slid her chair back, stretched her fingers once, then locked them onto the targeting frame. Her eyes no longer saw symbols. They saw waves, slopes, peaks, pressure gradients. A language only her nervous system understood. "Minerva 1, Noorani said, flipping the manual toggle to live engine control. "Now breaching sensor perimeter. Confirm intent." "Confirmed," she answered, and the ship, ragged and slow, dove straight into the Karen perimeter like it belonged there. Inside, the noise returned, just under the threshold of hearing, and Iris closed her eyes, listening to the pressure of the void, as if it was whispering her name. The Minerva 1 breached the inner ring of the Karen system like a wounded animal drifting into a predator's nest. Its flight path stuttered, One of the auxiliary thrusters fired 3 times in the wrong direction. The ship tilted, then corrected, badly. On the long-range sensors of the Imperial fleet, it looked like a drifting mistake. From the bridge of the Threxen-Vool, Admiral Sir Vauric narrowed his eyes. "Primitive," he muttered. The viewing sphere projected the image in crystalline clarity. The human ship, dull gray and unsymmetrical, crawling forward as if unaware of where it was. The Calith bridge crew stood in still precision around Vauric, their tall, lithe forms nearly statuesque. Their skin, layers of refractive plating over sinew and bone, shimmered with tones of cyan and gold under the dim lights. No one spoke until Vauric broke the silence. Analysis. Sub-Commander Jal Threx, thin-faced with vertical pupils and ceremonial neck blades folded back, gestured toward the visual feed. No spectral shielding, no subspace masking. Impulse coils misaligned. Emissions indicate subatomic leakage in the rear coil. Perhaps a mining drone retrofitted for scouting. Intentional? Vauric asked. Jal hesitated, then answered, "Unlikely. No Calith strategist would risk using chaos as a tactic." Vauric turned slowly, his cloak whispering across the polished obsidian floor. "Then it must be desperation." He raised one hand. "Signal the Varan Kaz. Intercept. Disable. Bring the humans aboard for dissection." The Varan Kaz detached from the formation like a polished spear gliding through dark water. Its lines were mathematically precise, hull layered with crystalline plating over tritanium mesh. 4 gravitic anchors oscillated beneath its core, stabilizing the reactorium engines at an efficiency of 87%. Everything about it was perfect until the Minerva shifted. Inside the Minerva 1, Nurani stared at the flashing lights on the side panel. "Contact established. They're moving," he said. Iris didn't respond. She was already tuned in, eyes locked to the waveform spread on the auxiliary screen. Her right hand hovered over the trigger node. Her breathing slowed again. She wasn't looking for movement. She was listening for fault lines. Nurani adjusted the angle of approach. The Minerva spun slightly, revealing its damaged port side, a decoy hull panel flickering its broken signature. It screamed target. The Varan Kaz approached in a wide arc, stabilizing its position 20 kilometers off the Minerva's bow. Its capture arrays powered up with a silent hum. In the Imperial cruiser's command center, Enforcer Tyrek Vo leaned forward, puzzled. He gestured toward the reactorium status grid. "Sir?" he called to the first operator. "Core readings are fluctuating." The operator, a Calith of copper-toned crest and emerald skin flakes, frowned. "Reactor shield temperature has risen by 3 Kelvin. No cause identified." Then came the scream. A junior technician, seated near the base of the gravitic array chamber, stood so abruptly his chair slammed to the floor. "Gravitation is—" He didn't finish. His voice dropped, face paling to a near-translucent shade. Vauric watched from the Threxen-Vool in silence. He could see the glow building at the center of the Varan Kaz. "Something's off," Nurani said in the Minerva. "Talk to me, Iris." She didn't blink. "Nodal breach at the reactorium lattice. I see a fracture in the primary anchor field. They've got structural harmonics exposed. How clean?" She adjusted the calculation grid, spun one dial by a quarter turn. "Vector available. I can collapse it." Nurani hesitated half a second. Authorization. Green. Her finger tapped the trigger. There was no sound, no beam, no flash. In the heart of the Varan Kaz, the harmonic generator spiked. The gravitational shielding matrix dropped by 2%, then by 20. No alarms triggered. Nothing in the system had a protocol for what followed. The center of the ship bent inward, not all at once. First the light bent, then the bulkhead surfaces rippled. A ripple became a fold became a void. Tyrek Vo fell forward, his boots no longer touching the floor. He clawed at a railing as his body twisted left, then up, then nowhere. One scream, one static burst. Then the entire cruiser folded like wet cloth and vanished. No debris, no blast, just a blink, and nothing. Back on the Threxan Vool, Varric stared at the now empty space. "Where is it?" Jal asked. Varric didn't answer. The data feed looped. No weapon trace, no kinetic impact, no explosive thermal change. Nothing. "Repeat sensor sweep," Varric commanded. "Full pulse, all spectrums." Jal hesitated. "There's nothing to scan. There's no signal." Nurani exhaled once, slow and even. Iris leaned back slightly in her chair. "They didn't understand." "They won't," Nurani said. "They don't think like us." She turned her head, looked him in the eye for the first time since the attack. That was only the first. He nodded once, then turned the ship toward the center of the Imperial formation. The Minerva 1 oscillated slightly as its thrusters kicked in. Unstable, flawed, visibly imperfect. To the Caliph, it still looked like a ship about to fall apart. But the Vuran Kaz didn't fall apart. It ceased to exist. And that, Varric realized too late, was worse. The void left by the Vuran Kaz pulsed with silence. Not debris, not vapor, just an absence. On the bridge of the Threxan Vool, Admiral Sir Varric stared at the empty grid square on the tactical array, hands locked behind his back. His neck crest had tightened, pigment flickering with iridescent orange, a Caliph signal of elevated tension, normally hidden behind decorum. Jal Threx stood a meter behind, uncertain whether to speak. Around them, the crew remained motionless, eyes on their interfaces, waiting for orders that didn't come. "Did they cloak?" Jal finally asked, his voice a controlled whisper. "No," Varric replied. "We would still detect gravitic signature." "Then they fled?" "No," he said again, more forcefully. His voice dropped to a measured growl. "They were erased." Outside the viewport, the remaining ships of the Imperial containment fleet hovered in perfect geometric formation, like cathedral pillars suspended in stasis. But now, hesitation rippled. Some repositioned slightly. Some broke timing on their energy pulses. Small errors, unnoticed in any other context. On Caliph ships, perfection was doctrine. Instability was not. Varric stepped forward. "Signal the Hrivalkas, Nuthar Sun, and Velrax Tool. Tell them to advance. Overrun the human ship. Disable it. Do not destroy it. I want their mechanism intact." Jal hesitated. Varric's eyes snapped toward him. Now. Inside the Minerva 1, Nurani tightened his harness straps. The glow from the outer hull shielding reflected across his visor, flickering as energy readings surged in response to the Caliph movements. "They're coming," he said. Iris was already leaning forward, her hands hovering over the targeting array, not yet touching. Her breath came through shallow and slow, controlled. But Nurani saw it, the fine tremor at the tips of her fingers, the small twitch under her right eye, residual stress. "They're triangulating us," Nurani said, reading the vector overlays. "One high, two low. They're boxing us in." "I can't fire blind," Iris murmured. "I need—" She cut herself off and snapped the tuner dial 2 clicks left. Her pupils dilated. She inhaled sharply through her nose and started moving. First ship, Hrivalkas. Outer shielding reinforced by triple resonance, but their field bleeds on the ventral side. I'm going under. Nurani locked eyes on the data. Clear. She tapped the trigger. A pulse. Nothing at first. Then, on the Hrivalkas, a humming vibration, like the ship itself had become a tuning fork. Internal gravity peeled sideways. A crewman screamed as his boot slipped off the floor and he slammed into the upper bulkhead. Then, silence. The ship didn't explode. It bowed inward, then vanished in a snap of compressed space, the hull crumpling faster than the eye could track. "One," Nurani said. Iris blinked twice, then recalibrated the tuner again. Second ship's lattice is shielded against oscillation, but not phase disruption. I'm going to fracture the core transit field. Give me 6 seconds. 5, 4. She twitched. 2. She fired. The Nethar soon flared white-hot, then collapsed in on itself so quickly that the light took longer to fade than the vessel itself lasted. Only a high-pitched pressure shift marked its absence, like air had been pulled through a needle's eye. 2, Nurani confirmed. Iris exhaled, but it was shaky now. She rubbed her thumb and forefinger together once, residue from stress-induced microtremors. Her other hand was already back on the dial. Third ship's energy flow is erratic. Too many ripple echoes. I can't see the core lines. Abort? She didn't answer. Her eyes moved rapidly, then slowly, then rapidly again. Give me 20 seconds. 10, Nurani replied. Damn it. She refocused, closed one eye. Moved the dial so slightly it barely registered. Now. She hit the trigger. The Velrax tool resisted. For a moment. Long enough for its internal dampeners to spike readings. Then the ship began to rotate. Slowly at first, then violently, as if caught in an unseen whirlpool. Inside, a Kalith officer clawed at his seat restraints, watching the ceiling fold toward him. Then the ship inverted, not physically, gravitationally. The hull twisted like a spiral of foil, pulled tight through an invisible needle, and vanished before the scream could finish. 3, Nurani said. You good? No, Iris whispered. Her fingers hovered again, but now her wrists were trembling visibly. Her skin had paled. Beads of sweat clung to her jawline, but she kept her eyes on the screen. Nurani turned toward the energy feedback display and noticed something else. The readings from the remaining Kalith vessels, especially those closest to the last 3, had begun to flicker. He narrowed his eyes. Field resonance. That's new, he muttered. There's bleed. The ships were trying to compensate, but their synchronous energy systems were out of balance now. The ripple patterns of the collapses weren't isolating. They were echoing. Something's wrong with their grid, he said. Iris didn't answer. She was still focused, but slower now. Her left hand rested uselessly on her lap. Her right hand still moved, but hesitantly. Nurani reached for a side panel, opened a flat notepad from the armrest compartment, and started jotting numbers. He didn't need to run calculations. He needed to record what was happening, what couldn't be predicted. His eyes flicked to Iris again. She was still functioning, but not for much longer. The first warning wasn't visual. It came through the vibrational sensors, low-frequency pulses rattling beneath the Minerva 1's cabin floor, like the hull itself had started to breathe. Nurani leaned forward, checking the readings. He expected energy backlash from the last implosion, maybe some phase residue, but what he saw didn't make sense. Gravitational drift, from outside. He looked up. Iris? She didn't answer. Her eyes were open, locked on the waveform display, but unfocused, like watching something not on the screen, but just behind it. He followed her gaze. The harmonic spectrum wasn't spiking from their ship. It was coming from everywhere at once. Iris finally spoke, her voice thin, detached. They're cross-linked. What do you mean? Their cores, their fleet. It's synchronized. Every ship, one lattice feeding another. She reached for the console, but her hand slowed, hovering. We broke the link, but it's still echoing. Nurani stood slowly, the chair creaking behind him. He stared at the energy field projection, now distorted, laced with overlapping interference, patterns feeding back into themselves. The ships hadn't just lost formation. They were caught in a recursive resonance. And then it started. The Rej Tolan, a carrier-class warship 4 kilometers to starboard, buckled mid-frame, not from impact. Its spine arched upward like metal under pressure, then twisted sideways, pulled against its own mass. Its center folded inward, and it was gone. No pulse, no light, just subtraction. Seconds later, the Elixir core followed. The ship convulsed as if yanked by unseen wires, hull panels shearing off into the void before its reactor core inverted and disappeared into a pinpoint collapse. The Drevvon, Arvath Cell, and Krex Moln went next, all within 22 seconds. Nurani stared at the cascading markers disappearing from his interface. "This isn't us," he said. Iris, pale now, finally looked up. Her hands fell limp at her sides. "It's the lattice," she said, almost to herself. "It's feeding back. We didn't collapse them. Not anymore." Nurani's screen blinked red. Vectoring systems had failed. The Minerva's onboard processor couldn't keep up. The gravitational anomalies created by the spontaneous implosions were warping the data mid-read. Calculations returned errors. Predictions contradicted themselves. The ship's targeting software rebooted twice in 5 seconds, and then locked into failsafe. They were flying blind. "Iris," Nurani said, "we've lost control of projections. Nothing's reading." "I know," she whispered. Her eyes were unfocused, lips parted slightly. The field's folding space around itself. Every implosion's pulling the lattice tighter, like they're trying to breathe through broken ribs. Nurani turned back to the viewport. Debris from the destroyed Kalith ships drifted chaotically, but not freely. Some fragments spun in place, orbiting invisible points. Others moved in angular bursts, dragged and released as if caught in fractured wells of gravity. It didn't resemble a battlefield. It resembled a machine coming apart, piece by piece, faster than it could stop itself. On board the Threx and Vul, Admiral Sir Vaurik stared at the carnage. The fleet was no longer in formation. His command grid, normally a lattice of perfect structure, had become a blinking, strobing mess. Signals dropped and returned at random. Distortion waves cut across his monitors in sweeping arcs. His voice projection system crackled with delayed echoes. He stood in place, unmoving. Then he spoke, cold and sharp. "Evacuation protocol. Broadcast to all units. Form fallback trajectories and withdraw." Jal Threx, now visibly shaken, tried to comply. "Course vectors are unreadable, Admiral. Gravitational dissonance is compromising helm stabilization." "Then brute force a route," Vaurik growled. "Split the net. Get us out." 2 nearby ships, Cyril Thun and Velthakar, activated emergency thrusters. The Cyril Thun lurched upward, burst away from the field, and stopped. Its aft section didn't move with the rest. The entire rear half remained trapped, spasming, while the front surged forward like it had been slingshot. The hull snapped, twisted, then folded back violently, crumpling into a singular knot before vanishing. The Velthakar tried banking starboard to avoid the distortion, but one of the debris fields locked its path. It didn't hit anything visible, but it slowed, then bent. One side of the hull turned inward, slowly, until the entire vessel was dragged backwards into a spiral vortex of invisible force. Inside the Minerva, alarms blared, but not from enemy fire. "Distortion expanding," Nurani muttered. "We're still outside the collapse radius, but we're not isolated." "I can't map a course," Iris said. "Nothing stable to anchor against." She leaned forward again, fingers twitching as she reached for the manual dampener node. Her breaths were sharp, uneven now. The cabin lights dimmed, flickered, then stabilized. 11 minutes had passed. Only the Minerva remained. Around it, the graveyard. Twisted frames, shattered fragments. Molecular dust suspended in invisible cages of force and gravity. The Kalith fleet, what was left of it, had become part of the field. Not destroyed in combat, destroyed by itself, by its perfection, by the one rupture that couldn't be predicted. Iris closed her eyes. "This isn't war," she whispered. "It's decay." The deck beneath Nurani's boots groaned as the Minerva 1 shifted its vector. Metal flexed. Somewhere behind the bulkhead, coolant hissed against a warped conduit. He kept one hand on the stabilizer and the other on the sensor console, watching as the last pulses of Kalith energy signatures flickered, then vanished entirely from the tactical map. Nothing remained. No heat signatures. No structural echoes. Just emptiness. And scattered interference patterns flickering like static ghosts across every screen. A faint alert buzzed. The comms relay, previously dark, came alive with a scratch of broken modulation. The transmission was brief. A clipped audio burst caught midstream from a failing relay. "This is not possible." Then silence. Noorani exhaled, shoulders tight, fingers frozen over the replay toggle. He played the message again. Same voice, same tone. No distortion beyond the initial static crackle. The voice was unmistakably Kalith, deep, composed but laced with disbelief. A tone Noorani had never heard from them before. He activated the ship's signal tracer and locked the source. A degraded fragment from what used to be the Threxan Vool's central command channel. Not the ship itself, the ship was gone, but a delayed burst caught in gravitational drift, reaching them seconds too late. He saved the log, labeled it, Final Kalith Intercept. 001. Iris hadn't moved. Her seat was slouched low, and her frame seemed smaller now, like her body had shrunk inward from sheer exhaustion. Her hands rested on her lap, limp. Her eyes were open, unfocused, tracking nothing in particular. She was pale. Not just from stress, her skin had gone translucent in places, like the color had drained from beneath the surface. Her lips were slightly parted, breathing slow, shallow, mechanical. Noorani took one step toward her. "Iris," he said quietly. "You still with me?" She blinked. Slow. Her jaw flexed, but no sound came. He knelt beside her. "We're clear. They're gone. We're not in combat anymore." Her lips moved faintly. The sound she made wasn't a word, just a breath. But it was enough. Noorani nodded once and returned to the pilot's chair. The system diagnostics were still running loops, cycling through the damage report. The generator core was barely holding its 62% containment. Electromagnetic interference from the collapse field had corrupted half the internal logs. The tactical array was frozen, stuck in a recursive feedback loop, endlessly calculating vectors that no longer existed. The starboard dampener flared red. Overload warning. He rerouted the energy flow manually, stabilizing it just under threshold. A flicker of light at the corner of the ceiling signaled shorting in the upper conduits. The Minerva wasn't dead, but it was bleeding. Noorani tapped a few commands into the flight interface, locking in the emergency containment sequence. Then he did something no protocol would have called for. He shut down all automatic subsystems. One by one, he transferred controls to manual. Thrust vectoring, power management, thermal regulation, shield cycling, all of it. If they were going to make it out, they had to fly like it was 200 years ago. Behind him, a low crack sounded, cable insulation splitting in the corner. A few sparks popped, then faded. He didn't flinch. Instead, he brought up the auxiliary comms channel. The Kalith bands were empty, clean scans. No ghost pings, no relay signals, no background noise. Dead space. Then, another alert. This one tagged inbound transmission. Private command line. Level. Admiral. He opened it. A voice spoke, barely coherent, warped beyond repair by interference. The message had been initiated during the field collapse. It was never completed. "This is Varik. Collapse protocol. Unpredictable vectors. They think in chaos. Terminate. The rest fragmented, not cut, consumed." Noorani ran a frequency trace, but it looped. No origin. The signal had fractured into the distortion field. It had no direction, no time signature, just a dying thought, clawing through fractured space to deliver a message that was already too late. He closed the feed. The silence afterward was thicker than vacuum. He glanced again at Iris. Her eyes had drifted shut now, though her head hadn't moved. Her pulse monitor still pulsed. Barely. Noorani leaned forward and tapped the main thruster ignition. "Stabilizers online," he said. "Route to Ganymede locked." A pulse thudded through the hull as the engines realigned. He felt the weight shift. The inertial dampeners failed for a second. His stomach dropped as the ship tilted off-axis, then caught. The nose came around. The Minerva began to move. Beneath them, the field remained, an ocean of silence, gravity, and invisible edges. The site where 19 ships had once held perfect formation was now nothing but broken mass caught in warped tides. There was no center, no perimeter, just overlapping currents, folding space over itself in collapsing spirals. Noorani locked in the flight path manually. Every automated system had frozen. The Minerva's nav software couldn't process anything inside the field anymore. The engines burned soft, low-frequency pulses firing one by one, guiding them between the worst of the interference zones. Even the stars ahead shimmered wrong, bent around gravity seams left behind by the collapse. The ship shook once more, a long, slow grind of metal on metal as internal compensators caught the drift. He steadied the flight. As the Minerva pulled away, the last ripple from the field reached them. It wasn't visible, just a pressure shift, like the ship had passed through a sudden change in temperature without warning. A small klaxon beeped. Noorani reached to silence it, but stopped. It wasn't a warning. It was a notification. Sensor report. No active hostile signatures detected. He let it ring once more before shutting it down. Iris shifted in her seat. One hand lifted and found the console edge. Her fingers curled around it slowly, almost instinctively. She opened her eyes. Her thumb brushed the console surface like she was checking if it was real. "We made it?" she asked, voice hoarse. Noorani looked back at her. "Not yet," he said. "But we're out." She didn't smile. She just nodded. It took her effort. The lights in the bridge dimmed again as the last of the Minerva's energy redirected to core systems. The sparks in the far cable finally stopped. Even the console hum dropped a pitch. The ship was quiet, and behind them, the last whisper from an empire echoed in a line of broken code Noorani didn't bother to erase. "They think in chaos. Terminate." He closed the channel. Set course for home. The docking clamps caught with a dull thud. Minerva 1 jolted slightly as its battered hull locked into place beneath the orbital platform above Ganymede. The rotation of the station slowed to accommodate their velocity, magnetic anchoring pulling the crippled vessel gently into the berth. Warning lights flickered across the interior panels. Nothing urgent, nothing fatal. Just a ship that had reached its end. Inside the cockpit, Gavin Noorani remained still for a moment. He watched the external monitors blink through the final sequence. Secure, pressurized, sealed. The glow of Jupiter washed across the viewport in uneven hues, casting long shadows over the interior. Most of the systems were in low power mode. The hum of the generator had become faint, irregular, barely audible now beneath the ticking metal and the rhythmic hiss of cooling lines. He turned his attention to Iris. She hadn't moved since their final engine burn. Her vitals blinked faintly on the auxiliary display. Oxygen low, skin temp down 2 degrees, heart rate erratic. The respiration monitor glowed orange. Not failing, but not stable. She was slumped slightly in the chair, chin angled toward her chest, breathing through her mouth. Her eyes were half open, eyelids fluttering with shallow awareness. The fingers of her right hand twitched, barely grazing the edge of the control panel. Noorani unclipped his restraints, stood, and made his way across the narrow cabin. The floor vibrated beneath him, residual stress from the landing. He moved slowly, deliberately. Not out of caution, but to match the weight of the moment. He knelt beside her seat. Her gloves were still on, black, scuffed, lined with conductive patches for the manual console. He reached out and began removing them one by one, carefully pulling each fingertip loose before sliding them from her hands. Her skin underneath was pale, clammy, fingernails slightly blue. He didn't speak. He just held her hands in his for a few long seconds, fingers wrapped around hers, not tight, but steady. Not to warm her, but to anchor her. Finally, she blinked again, more alert now. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Noorani shifted his weight and gently lifted her arm, pulling it over his shoulders. With one hand on her back and the other beneath her elbow, he helped her stand. She staggered as her boots scraped against the floor, knees buckling. He held firm, keeping her upright. "You did it," he said, voice low. "You went beyond what anyone thought was possible." She exhaled softly. Her lips curved, not quite a smile, but something close. A silent nod of acknowledgement. Her eyes barely stayed open, but they focused on him now. Recognition. Then she leaned her weight into his shoulder. Together, they took a step, then another. The corridor to the decompression chamber lit up ahead, dull blue lights twitching like nerves under skin, half alive, half failing. The station's auto-link system was already extending an umbilical, but no crew was waiting at the interface. No applause, no questions, no fanfare, just airlock cycling, pressure balancing. Another mission finished, if it could be called that. The soft clank of their boots on metal echoed in the silence. Behind them, the Minerva's systems ticked and hissed, the sound of a ship cooling after a fire. The residual gravitational harmonics from the collapse field still clung to the outer hull, sensor spikes flashing on the outer shell of the station. Engineers would see them later and ask what the hell happened. But for now, they walked. Slow, steady, each step deliberate. Inside Iris, the strain pulsed with every movement. Her limbs trembled with exertion. Her balance faltered twice before they reached the inner door. She didn't speak, but she didn't need to. Noorani stopped at the entrance of the inner decon bay. The door ahead had yet to cycle. The sensors were still verifying atmosphere and biosignatures. He turned to her, still holding her up. She looked at him just for a second. The smallest expression crossed her face, half smile, half sigh. Gratitude. Nothing spoken, no victory speech. Just a sliver of shared understanding between two people who had risked everything and returned with more than anyone had asked them to. He nodded back. Then the door opened. They stepped into the clean light of the chamber beyond. Behind them, the ship's sensor suite continued to run on backup power. Faint pulses from the collapse zone, now several million kilometers away, still echoed through the fabric of space. Distortion waves, micro-anomalies, chatter on inactive frequencies. The Minerva 1 secondary log processor caught them all. Each irregular blip was logged, each distortion time-stamped. There was no analysis, only numbers, only noise. Outside, above the clouds of Ganymede, the ringed planet hung motionless in the sky, watching. A single image looped across every encrypted military relay from the Cimmerian belt to the Haldean reach. No sound, just a visual, a Calith cruiser, designation Hrevel Cass, folding in on itself in perfect silence. Not exploding, not struck, simply erased, as if space had changed its mind about allowing it to exist. The footage was time-stamped. It had no metadata. It had no attached commentary. It needed none. Across the galactic networks, silence reigned for nearly 6 hours. No official statements, no strategic briefings, just the loop. Ship after ship, the Calith formation breaking not through war, but through collapse. 11 vessels gone. Each frame stripped of context, the angles raw and unedited, streamed across back-channel hubs and dark data feeds used by every intelligence agency in the core systems. Then came the chatter. First from independent analysts, then from military attachés in the periphery zones. Within 24 hours, the footage had reached over 77 secured observation nodes in the Sovereign Gate region alone. By the third day, someone inside the Atranis Orbital Syndicate leaked the rest. Sensor logs, collapsed field resonance charts, harmonic drift anomalies, and, buried deep in an encrypted signature packet, a single line. Designation, Minerva 1, Tactical Collapse Generator Test, Live Environment, Validation, Outcome, Anomalous Strategic Superiority. Inside the Imperial Assembly Hall on Virex Kyle, the Calith Council convened under emergency quorum. The chamber, a massive shell of compressed crystal and polarized graviton rings, shimmered under ambient lighting meant to soothe high-crest Calith physiology. Every seat was filled, each by a member of the genetic merit caste, their skins glowing with the luster of command. Admiral Sir Vorik was not among them. His presence had been officially removed from registry 90 hours after contact loss. The Minister of External Proliferation, Vile Turek, addressed the assembly in controlled Calithic cadence. We have classified the incident as an internal energetic cascade triggered by harmonic feedback between synchronized lattice cores. The term used shall be Anomaly Class V, no engagement confirmed, no hostile action verified. The footage distributed is speculative, unvetted. A pause. Damage to the Empire's perception is containable. But it wasn't. On the galactic Senate station of Pharos Prime, located at the convergence of 6 trade axes, the mood had shifted. Not in open accusation. Not yet. But diplomats from the Terran Accord, the Ventari League, and even the neutral Autari Guild had filed formal requests for clarification. The language was precise, legal, controlled, but behind each phrase was the same unspoken question. How did one Earth vessel dissolve a Calith fleet without firing a conventional weapon? In the session chamber, Earth's representative, Director Saul Mercer, said nothing during the proceedings. He wore a plain black suit. No insignia, no medals. He simply watched. Every time a Calith delegate rose to speak, his expression remained unchanged. He left before the closing statements. Inside the Central Command Center beneath the Ceres defense ring, General Colin Tren reviewed the decrypted summary of the incident. The report was 74 pages long. He didn't read most of it. He skipped directly to the appendix, where the Protocolo Collapso evaluation team had submitted their final recommendation. Operational designation, TCG Minerva, result, viability confirmed, field efficiency, 100%. Human risk, threshold, critical, not recommended for extended operations. The signature of approval came from Dr. Elian Reck, head of classified weapons systems at the Europa Deep Core facility. Attached was a personal note. The system works, but it costs more than we built it to spend. Tren closed the file. In the next chamber, technicians prepped the Minerva 1 for disassembly and analysis. The ship's outer hull was visibly warped. Microfractures ran along the primary structure like veins. The interior had suffered energy scars from the residual gravitational distortions, burns that couldn't be replicated in lab conditions. The cockpit smelled of scorched coolant and metal fatigue. The flight logs were partially corrupted. The core was unstable. They didn't care. The operation had delivered. The Calith Empire, for the first time in over 4 centuries, had lost not in debate or doctrine, but in space, and they had no explanation. Before the Minerva was fully secured, a short transmission was released through official Terran command channels. No press conference, no context, no spokesperson. Just a single-line message transmitted on all diplomatic frequencies and routed to the Galactic Senate's shared archive. The message contained no encryption, no delay, no embellishment, just bandwidth and truth. 1 human ship, 11 Imperial vessels. Do the math. Hey, you're still here. That's awesome. Hope you had a great time with the story. Remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons. It really makes a huge difference to the channel. And hey, I've got something else for you. I've chosen another story that I think you'll really enjoy. Just click the card right here, or hit this one to jump into the full playlist. See you in the next one.